Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on what part of the world you're connecting from. Hopefully not good night. Welcome to this webinar, the second in a three-part series on emotional intelligence. The intention has been to have a truly African conversation on COVID-19 and emotional intelligence, or emotional quotient, EI or EQ, in Africa. So welcome, thank you for joining us. Hopefully we have some, or if not the same people that attended part one, but if this is your first time, welcome. Thank you for coming. So this is a webinar, part of the series organized by the Lagos Business School of the Pan-Atlantic University. The webinar is going to last for 90 minutes, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Just a bit of housekeeping. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Please use that for questions, the Q&A button. All right, although there is a chat button, we will not use that. So when I want questions, I'll go to the Q&A box. So I'll be very grateful if you put your questions there. Now, if you want to ask a question and you find that a question has been asked that reflects your thinking, kindly simply upvote that question. So I'll look at the questions with the highest number of upvotes and ask those. On May 27th, which was the part one, the topic was COVID-19, emotional intelligence and the African context. We had people from different parts of Africa. I will introduce them shortly. Today, May 29th, part two, the topic is COVID-19, emotional intelligence and organizations in Africa. We're diving in. And then on June 1st, next Monday, part three, we'll talk about COVID-19, leadership, institutions, and education in Africa. Can EI, emotional intelligence, lead the way? A little bit about the participants. Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. We have from East Africa, Carl Wagner, from the Strathmore Business School, Kenya. From West Africa, we have Uchora Udoji from the Lagos Business School, Nigeria. From Ghana, also in West Africa, we have Kwesi Amposa Tawia from the University of Ghana Business School, Ghana. From North Africa, we have Mohamed Radwan from the American University in Cairo School of Business, Egypt. From South Africa, we have Basil Leonard from the University of Stellenbosch Business School, South Africa. Thank you very much for coming. For the benefit of those who were there the first time and those joining us today, just a bit of a recap, okay? A summary, if you like, from day one. Day one, again, the topic was COVID-19, emotional intelligence and the African context. That conversation was kicked off by Basil Leonard, who gave us a definition of emotional intelligence. He told us the two dimensions of emotional intelligence, the personal dimension, the interpersonal one. Under the personal dimension, he talked about two aspects, self-awareness, self-management, and that under interpersonal, there are also two aspects that we can deal with there, social awareness, relationship management. Then below these two dimensions, personal and interpersonal, he brought our attention also to competencies, emotional competencies, emotional intelligence competencies, because to measure, to define something, okay, so you need to know what are the competencies there, self-awareness, self-regulation, flexibility. And then another interesting thing that he said many interesting things, was how emotional intelligence, for example, empathy goes beyond perspective taking, listening with the intent to understand, not just to respond. And then Kwesi from West Africa talked about emotional intelligence in a rather unique way, using African proverbs, because the question he was trying to tackle was whether the African was emotionally intelligent. Using African proverbs, he demonstrated that indeed they have always been and they are, okay, because he was able to take a proverb, connect it with some of the competencies mentioned by Basil. For example, I remember one: if you have a bad tummy, you don't go eating from any pot. Okay, what competence? Self-awareness. So that was nice. That was very nice. And then Uchora from the Lagos Business School was answering the question whether emotional intelligence translates across cultures. The short answer to her question was no, it doesn't translate across cultures. In fact, she said that even though emotional intelligence sometimes has some things similar to cultural intelligence, they are not the same. And because emotional intelligence does not translate across cultures, that's why cultural intelligence supports it. And then, of course, then she went to Hofstede's cultural dimensions to give examples of cultural dimensions. For instance, she mentioned power distance or collectivism. And then Carl was taking us through now, bringing us back to the present situation of COVID-19 to talk about two competencies of emotional intelligence that may be useful in these times. And then he mentioned empathy and motivation or resilience, the ability to bounce back. Okay, and then I liked very much because he was able to relate empathy not just in the business environment, but also dealing with other people. Whatever you're going through now in these times, somebody else is going through the same thing or even worse. And then Mohammed Radman, who is from his board experience and then EQ measurement expertise, was able to talk about the mental health of leaders, EQ assessment, and then he talks about how he's able to link these measurements also to the leadership roles of development, how to make impact. So really, if you missed part one, you missed part one. But not to worry, we're going to share the link with you. Okay, we're going to share the link with you. All right, so I'm going to share a poll with you now before we kick off the conversation. Okay, so I'm going to share a poll now, and then I'll urge you to take the poll quickly because it will be up for a very short time. There we go. So while the poll is going on, please use the Q&A button for your questions. I will not pay attention to the chat box. Use the Q&A button for your questions. And then if you see a question similar to yours, simply upvote it. I will ask the questions with the highest number of upvotes. So the poll is running now. The question you are responding to is, what do you see as being the typical African style of leadership? What do you see as being the typical African style of leadership? Very good. A few more minutes for that poll, and then we'll dive right into today's conversation. Each of the panelists will have 5 minutes to speak in the first instance. And then we will get you into the conversation as soon as possible. So there is a poll running now. It's been on for 1 minute, 16 seconds. It's going to be on for just a short time before it disappears. What do you see as being the typical African style of leadership? Okay, see some questions here. Yes, yeah, someone is giving me an answer here. Just respond in the poll. No, yeah. We don't want to mail in ballot boxes. Respond in the poll. Thank you very much. All right, very good. So we are going to kick off. Welcome Basil, welcome Kwesi, welcome Carl, welcome Uchora, welcome Mohammed. So the first question, I think we're going to start from South Africa. Basil, I'd like to ask, because today we're focusing on organizations, and talking about organizations, the position of leaders become very important. So let's talk about leaders for a bit. And with respect to AI, what would you suggest we must look for in current and future leaders? What would you suggest we must look for in current and future leaders?
Thank you, Eugene. I would like to suggest that there are most probably as many definitions of leadership as what we have books on leadership. And so it is very difficult to capture one single definition and say, this is what it should be. I think I'd rather like to approach it from a different point of view. And the point of view I would like to use is to rather throw out what I consider are leadership qualities that we should include. So if in your organization you are looking at a definition of leadership for your organization, I'm going to suggest some competencies or qualities that I think should be in your definition. Now, the first one I would like to refer to is that of integrity. And I'm starting with integrity because I believe it sets the moral basis for much of what follows thereafter. If I work from a position of integrity as a leader, I establish a very important relationship with my people. Next for me would be the whole understanding of having vision. I find that in too many organizations, people basically move from day to day, month to month, year to year, and don't really fully understand where are they going. Now, the big company or the big organization may have a beautifully drafted vision. It may even appear on their walls. But if you go down to the people on the floor, very few times do they have any inkling of what that is. They don't even understand it. If you were to stop them in the corridor and ask, what is your company's vision? They have no idea. So I think vision, now for me, the vision should be personal, but it should also then be organizational. Flowing out of the integrity, I would like to say we need to be found to be trustworthy. I've always felt that it is incorrect to ask the people, trust me. No, I don't think we must ask people to trust us. We must actually show ourselves to be trustworthy by the way we work with them, what we say, our actions. And then something that I find is lacking quite a bit, Eugene, is that of decisiveness. I seem to pick up a lot in our organizations what I would like to call a referral system when it comes to making decisions. So I'm with my team. I must make a decision with my team. I don't make the decision. So I refer to my head. And of course, whatever my head says, I will now take to my team as if it comes from me. But it doesn't really come from me. It's more like I'm covering my own back in case the thing comes back to me. So decisiveness for me is very important. And then something that I am also very concerned about when I think of the qualities I need to see has to do with the results. What are you producing for us in this organization? Which the word I would like to use here is that of effectiveness. How effective are you as a leader? And then the one that we had yesterday, I think we must add in again as a quality for leadership, and that is empathy. Do I really understand my people? Can I really identify with my people? And then the one that yesterday Carl was doing for us on resilience, I think that needs to be there. So for me, if I look at the qualities, I would say it should be integrity, vision, trustworthiness, decisiveness, effectiveness, empathy, and then resilience. The key, however, is not having these qualities, because I think we can find a lot of people with these qualities. The question now is, how does the emotionally intelligent leader show forth these qualities? And I'm going to suggest that there are one or two things that will show that this is an emotional intelligent leader with these qualities. One of it is, I will exhibit these qualities with understanding. So it's not just about me, but I understand the situation, I understand the context, I understand my people. And then what I personally think we are missing very many times is that of doing it inspirationally. We cannot take people anywhere if we are not inspirational with them. We all have needs, we all go through emotional difficulties, and it's great to have a leader who inspires you not just in your work, but even in your personal life, and takes you forward. And linking back to the qualities of integrity and being trustworthy, I would feel that it must be done in a values-based system. Now, I feel that very many times the leaders would do things, but then afterwards the staff may discover, but hang on, they said to us they could only do A and B. Now we find out that they've also done C and D. So where were those values then that were supposed to undergird our discussions with them? And then, of course, for me, very importantly, it must always be done positively. I really struggle when you have somebody in leadership who is negative or demeaning to people. I really don't understand why that happens. Can I, as a leader, stay positive? I just want to mention quickly that I think added to that, I would include what I call the 4 dimensions of leadership. And these 4 dimensions of leadership refer to my being, which is my character. It refers to my doing, which is my behavior. It refers to my knowing, where a lot of our competence comes from. And then very important, it refers to my thinking, which shows my ability to reflect. Now, if I look at those 4, it's very interesting that I cannot really assess somebody's character very easily. I really have to get to know you quite a bit. I can't really determine the depth of your knowing very easily. And your thinking, even more difficult. I really don't know what's going on in your head. And so, surprise, surprise, the one area where we are really being assessed as leaders is in our behavior. People look at how we act, how we are with them, what we do with them. And that says everything about what should be going on in the other areas. So may I just end with this, because this is something I've picked up that I think is quite essential for a definition. If something is not part of your being, in other words, your character, it is not sustainable in your doing. In other words, your behavior. I can try, but you will soon discover I'm just pretending with you. I think I'd like to stop there, Eugene.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Basil. That's very insightful. I find it particularly interesting that you tie 4 dimensions of leadership. When you're talking about the 4 dimensions of leadership, we can even recognize cognitive, affective, and behavioral. Same dimensions we can recognize when talking about EQ. And then you make the point very well, therefore, that a good leader has to be an emotionally intelligent one. And I like the point you ended with. For it to be sustainable, it has to be embedded in my character. Fantastic, Basil. And then now begin to wonder, if that is the case, if these are the suggestions you make of what we should look out for in current and future leaders, and then we have leaders in organizations, we have leaders in groups, we begin to wonder why they should even bother. You say it's a good thing. Maybe Kwesi can speak on this, because Kwesi, I would like to ask, why should we bother? What are the benefits of emotional intelligence to organizations? If we consider them from the individual level, group, why should we bother? What are the benefits?
Thank you very much, Eugene, for the question. And I would want to say that, well, I would want to look at this question from a point of view of looking at what an organization is in itself. Because when we talk about organization, yes, we normally say when 2 or more people come together to pursue a common agenda, then we have an organization. And understand that, well, organizations exist in a constellation of relationships. That is, human beings coming together to pursue a common agenda. Yes, and as the good books, the Bible will say, can 2 work together, lest they be agreed? It is important that, well, these individuals who come together to pursue a common agenda agree. And as has been mentioned by Dale Carnegie, we should appreciate the fact that, well, in an environment where we have people, we are not merely dealing with creatures of logic, but we're also dealing with creatures of emotions, because what? Emotions reside in people. And that is why it is imperative, it is important that in organizations, yes, we indeed highlight this issue of emotional intelligence, because you are dealing with emotive beings in organizations, people with emotions, not necessarily logical beings. It is said that, well, the aptitude of individuals will take them as far as to an institute, but that which take them to the altitude is their attitude. So whereas aptitude takes you to an institute, what takes you to the altitude is attitude. And when you bring this to the collective, what takes organizations to the altitude? It is the collective attitudes of the people who work in the organization. And as has been indicated by Basel, we get to realize that, well, our attitudes, that is our behaviors, are largely influenced by our emotions. They inform, our emotions inform the way we act. Indeed, as has been indicated by other scholars, they mentioned that, well, yes, there is something more to intelligence than acting intelligently. There's something more to it. Within organizations, we would want people to act intelligently. Yet when we are recruiting people on the job, we are looking at your intelligence. And that is why we conduct aptitude tests, to get to know the intellect of the person. Yet research has proven that, well, employees who are successful on the job, indeed, tend to have 85%, we are looking at, they tend to possess people skills and leadership skills, which form about 85%. So, and with the remaining 15% that we talk about coming from the traditional qualifications of work experience and our academic qualifications, etc., etc. So it brings out the point that, well, many a times in organization, we tend to focus on something else. But you realize that, well, the leadership and the people skills are that which get employees to be successful in organization. And that is why, for me, emotional intelligence really kicks for me. Because, well, studies are bound to prove the point that, well, successful individuals on the job are highly emotionally intelligent. People with high emotional intelligence tend to thrive on the job. Because, well, if you look at the dimensions of emotional intelligence, as was discussed in the last webinar, you'd realize that, well, it is imperative that, well, for people to work together, yes, they should understand themselves first. That is what we talked about, being personally aware, self-awareness. It is important that, well, in order to be able to work with other people, you should also understand the other person at the other end, being socially aware. You also have to empathize. Again, for individuals to be committed to their job, they need self-motivation. These are all dimensions within emotional intelligence that kicks. And in organizations that seek success and progress, emotional intelligence has been found to be something that, well, yes, needs to be looked at in such organization. However, in most organizations, attention is not given to, and just as I alluded to earlier on, when we are recruiting, in our training, in the creation of culture in organization, through the reward and the punishment system within organization, what are the things that we reward? Because these are the things that create the culture of the organization. What are the things that we tend to punish in the organization? Yes, in organization, those who come across to be agile intellectually, yes, we tend to hail them. But those who exhibit the tenets of having to work with other people in team, you would realize that emotional intelligence brings us a number of things. For instance, well, talking about we having to manage our stress levels. It helps because, well, once you are emotionally aware, you are able to regulate yourself in order to deal with your stress. because you know what causes you stress, you know how you feel when you are stressed out, and that you are able to manage it through the self-regulation mechanism. Emotional intelligence, when you're talking about the group level, for instance, well, yes, we are able, it helps in fostering resilience among the team, because you realize that, well, as a team, once we are socially aware and once we are empathetic towards each other, while we are careful, we are able to season our communication. We are able to communicate in a manner that keeps us together. And communication has been found to be the glue that bonds members within the organization together. It is therefore important that we understand emotional intelligence on the part of leaders, as indicated by Basel, goes a long way in creating the organizational climate, which is that which energizes the individual to give off his best within the organization. The way, and as indicated by Maria Angelou, individuals would never forget. They would forget the way what you said, they would forget what you did to them, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that is why leaders in organization ought to be emotionally intelligent by creating an environment that makes employees feel welcome in that environment. And as employees feel welcome, they are always looking forward to coming to work and contributing meaningfully to the organization. And that is critical. It is important that we understand that, well, employees would want to go where they are celebrated and not where they are tolerated. It is said that work should be enjoyed and not endured. An emotionally intelligent leader would always create a healthy environment that would bring the best out of individuals within the organization and augur well for the success of the organization. To end it up, I would say that, well, it is sad that many a times organizations have not looked at that. To create resilient teams and successful organization should now be given some attention to emotional quotient in their recruitment, in their training, and in the creation of culture in the organization. And this is what will get the organization to be able to adapt to the turbulent environment in which we find ourselves in. Thank you very much, Eugene.
Thank you very much, Kwesi. Thanks a lot. That was great. I was struck by that initial comment that intelligence goes beyond acting intelligently. And then I was now reminded of Basi's comment earlier about how it becomes enduring if it becomes part of your character until it leads to behavioral changes. And then later on, you tied it to, because the concern was how is this of benefit to organizations? You tied it to the group level, for example, how emotional intelligence helps to foster resilience. Okay. And then eventually, again, one of the things that in managing human beings, the most important resource in organizations that we care for is making them engaged. Employees who are emotionally and intellectually committed to the organization. And then you tied it there. Emotional intelligence important in creating organizational climate. Individuals they don't forget how they are treated, how you make them feel. They may forget how you treated them. They don't forget how you make them feel. Very good. Fantastic question. So at this point, thank you for all those who participated in the election, voting, poll. Yeah, so we're going to tell you the results now. So there was one question. The question was, what do you see as being the typical African style of leadership? And there were 6 options. 1, autocratic. 2, participative. 3, paternalistic. 4, laissez-faire. 5, charismatic. 6, transformational. And the winner goes to... Now, I'll keep you waiting. Now, let's see. Transformational, 3%. Participative, 3%. Charismatic, 4%. Laissez-faire, 6%. The winner is, there you go. See it for yourself. You say autocratic. All right. So what do you see as being the typical African style of leadership? It seems 72% of participants in this poll think that the typical African style of leadership is autocratic. Thank you. So we'll see. We'll talk about this. So we have more than 200 people participating from different parts of the world. I can tell from their names that there are some people I should say Akwabato. Kwesi will know what that means. There are some people I will say Kaributo. Both of them mean welcome, if I'm not mistaken. And yep, because I see. So welcome, everybody. Welcome. So we are going to go right ahead. I'm going to go right ahead. I'm going to talk with, I would like to talk about the link between, because we've talked about leaders and then the benefit of these behaviors or these traits that you find in leaders, the benefit of those in organizations. I would like to talk about whether there's any link between national culture, leaders, organizations, and emotional intelligence. Who better to answer this question than the one who a few days ago tackled the question about whether emotional intelligence translates across cultures? So Uchora, you know I'm talking about you. So the question is there a link between national culture, leaders, organizations, and emotional intelligence?
Indeed, there is. And I would like to thank Kwesi for his wonderful perspective on this, because, you know, the question is, because very well said, the question is how many of our leaders know what you just said. And I'm just going to perhaps say something that perhaps will tell us why we just got the results we got. You see, everyone comes from at least one country. So everyone has at least one national culture that they identify with. National culture is the patterns, the values, is the pattern of the values, the beliefs and attitudes and so on and so forth that affects the behavior of the people because they come from a certain part, because they come from a certain country, or because they have spent a considerable amount of time in that country. Some actually explain national culture as a collective programming of the mind that distinguishes members of one country from another. So who a person becomes is partly influenced by their national culture. Now, when a person gets hired into an organization, he or she becomes a member of that organization. To achieve its goals, the organization deploys a regime of control, a combination of bureaucratic and normative processes to ensure that social chaos is minimized. Now, this way, the organization maintains the order that paves the way for organizational performance. Now, sometimes the culture of the organization is at variance with national culture. The organizations, and organizations recognize that they cannot change national culture. The best an organization can do is perhaps to understand national culture and then use their understanding of national culture to achieve what they want to achieve. Now, this gap between national and organizational culture creates some kind of tension. Now, again, remember that typically an organization picks its leaders based on the organization's perceived ability of the leaders to deliver on organizational goals. However, national culture has already shaped the leadership style of the leader and the way those organizational leaders would function, and yet to be the main actors in establishing the culture of the organization, which their national culture is averse to. So now the leader is caught between two walls. This creates another kind of strain or tension. Now, the leader in question leads a work group. His performance in the organization is more or less assessed by his ability to get members of his work group to get on track with the organization's goals. But again, the people in this work group are nationals of the country who have already imbibed the country's national culture. This creates a third strain, a group strain. Now, these strains, amongst others, can have adverse impact on the performance of managers and the people who report to them. Indeed, in an African context, it can lead to extended employee disengagement. And the intelligence that can help relax these tensions is emotional intelligence. But here's the deal. The human being travels with emotions everywhere they go, and they see others traveling with theirs. But just because they travel with it and recognize it in others doesn't mean that they know what to do with it. So knowing what to do with one's emotions and the emotions of others, for example, the ability to use those emotions to motivate oneself and others, the ability to control impulses, to delay gratification, not just in self, but also in others, and so on and so forth. That is emotional intelligence. But look around. Most leaders in organizations in Africa still get to positions of leadership based on functional expertise only. Now, to qualify for leadership positions, a manager should, or for a leadership position, a manager needs two sets of expertise. He needs concrete expertise and he needs emotional expertise. Concrete expertise is the expertise that enables the leader to perform competently around function. And emotional expertise is that expertise that gives him the ability to perceive, to use, to manage, and so forth, emotions. Now, when there is an imbalance between concrete and emotional expertise, we say that the Peter principle has happened, that we have promoted someone to their level of incompetence. And so, yes, there is that link between national culture, organizations, leaders, and emotional intelligence. And this raises questions about what skills our leaders have to manage people in these COVID-19 times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uchora. Thank you. And I think I'm going to immediately invite Carl, because when Kwesi was speaking, Kwesi talked about some competencies. Earlier on in previous conversations, several of you talked about different competencies. And today as well, Anuchora, you yourself have talked about consequent competencies, and also especially in dealing with this disparity that often occurs between national culture and organizational culture. Competencies. So having listed and defined the core elements of leadership, Basti started that conversation. I'd like to ask Carl, what elements of leadership in African organizations, do you believe require effective levels of emotional intelligence?
Eugene, thank you very much. And it's been incredibly interesting to listen to everyone who's been speaking today so far. And then I'd like to try and pick up on a number of the points. Kwesi talked about engaged people, as did Uchoro. What I think is really interesting, Uchoro, is the concept you've positioned of my national culture versus my organizational culture. And just as a total aside, what I find interesting working in Africa is we have people, we have what we call, and we're all familiar with it, the expat, who comes into head an organization, and just listening to what you're saying can only lead to chaos, because I come with my Western national culture. So that was just an aside, which I think is very, very interesting in a topic in its own right. But if we have a look at what we've heard and what are some of those core things that we need, and I suppose it doesn't necessarily only apply to Africa, but we're looking at Africa. And we've heard things like engagement. The thought that I'm left with, Eugene, is so what's the business case? You know, Eugene, asked the question, why bother? And it's interesting, if we go back, majority of people, as I expected, are seeing more of an autocratic, authoritarian culture and leadership style. And if it's not authoritarian, it's paternalistic. So we're coming from a background of, let me tell you what to do it this way, that's how it's done. And yet we know, because the research has shown it time and time again, that you get better results through engaged people. You get better results through empowered people. And so to my mind, I often find myself saying, well, okay, if I've got these, let's call it hard-headed leaders, these leaders who are very authoritarian and autocratic or paternalistic, what is the business case? Why would I change? We heard beautifully from Uchuro on our first series about the need to change and that our population is changing, our culture is changing. We talked about the millennials and the Generation X and the Generation Z. So there's a need to change, but what's a business case? Why should I? All right, I get results, I tell people what to do, I shout at them, they perform, I get my results, and Basil has already said we want results, but he's also said we want empathy. To my mind, the business case that we need from an EQ point of view is that whole issue of the ability to engage people. We have seen, and you can see it in the research time and time again, engaged people perform better. So if you want to be a hard-headed CEO, that's fine, but let's get results. And let's understand we get results through engaged people, and engaged people requires an understanding of people. It requires that empathy that Basil was talking about. It requires a self-insight and self-awareness, a self-control. And therefore, I think we need to understand that we need to have engaged people. Another concept that comes to my mind, and it came, I think, Kwesi mentioned as well, and that is the concept of positive leadership. All right, and again, the research indicates so beautifully that by treating people positively, by finding what people have done right rather than what they have done wrong, we are able to get greater motivation, greater engagement. And that does not mean we ignore poor performance, but positive leadership yields better results. Engaged employees yield better results. And therefore, we need to be able to convince or display and or convince our leaders that we need to do this. Coming back to Uchuro's point, the challenge that we have is how we allow people to keep their national culture, because that's who they are, and that's cool, and that's what we need to be. But how do we start tweaking and developing? And it's not about let's throw away who we are. I think we need to keep who we are. And I think there's so much magic about who we are as Africans and as African leaders. But how do we start just adjusting and tweaking and refining slightly, that we can start including a greater degree of emotional awareness and awareness of others, thus greater levels of emotional intelligence to be able to enhance positive leadership, to be able to enhance employee engagement, and thereby get greater results. So ideally, we should display EQ because it's the right thing to do and it's morally correct. But hey, if you really want to be that autocratic leader, let's understand we want to get results. Let's understand we get results through the effective treatment of people. Engaged people deliver more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carl. So it comes down again to how we treat people, engagement, that point that Kwesi touched on again earlier on. Thank you very much, Carl. And then we go, I'm going all the way to North Africa. So now I'm convinced I'm a leader. I need EQ. I need it. My organization needs it. I know the competencies under EQ that I need to develop. I know the benefits. Okay, well, I need help. I need help. So, Mohammed, so how can leaders, because this is your core competence, one of your core competencies anyway, how can leaders develop their competency skills and then accordingly lead organizations, especially post-COVID-19? Okay, it's true we're considering leading the organizations now, and this is an opportunity, but how can leaders develop these skills to lead the organizations post-COVID-19?
Okay, thank you, Eugene. I would like to highlight probably two things in an attempt to answer that question. One of them is, it is the leader responsibility for their own development. You have to take charge. Yes, you can get support from an organization or others to help you, but it really will come down to a lot of which is the second point, practice and practice and practice and practice. So you'll have to take charge and practice. And one of the most impactful way to help you do so is something we call executive coaching. So you will have a coach that is mainly focusing on helping you develop your own skills. It's a journey, it's not a destination. You're gone through the rest of your life improving and developing. So we put that in place. What happens in organization is most leaders will learn by trial and error. And like you said, with the COVID-19, the VUCA environment we live in today, the challenges we're facing, we really can't afford, or we don't have the luxury to make many mistakes. especially that we're dealing with people and feelings and careers and so forth. So if we're back to what we said last session, if you have your emotional intelligence assessment reports, they come with the coaching reports as well, and that can guide you and help you. I like to make an analogy with soccer or football, which is not a strength area for me, for my friends who know that. But it's like having a team, a national team, and you have a coach for that team. But you got your star team, star player, so somebody like Mohamed Salah, for example, you will have a coach mainly focusing on his development. And that is exactly the same thing we do, what we call executive coach. Now, if I refer back to some of the points that we heard earlier from our colleagues, Basil, you were talking about the whole concept of knowing and being. That's the same thing when it comes to emotional intelligence. We talk to a lot of people, they know the concepts, but in practice, when they're in a situation, would they actually roll up their sleeves and do what needs to be done on a behavior level or not? So there was a survey done among leaders in organizations and in the region, and they asked him, what was the most important thing for the success of your organization? And the number one point was strategic thinking. I think more than 75% of the people agreed that that is the number one success factor for organizations. And then they asked the same people, well, how many are actually doing it? How many are actually dedicating the time and the energy to that strategic thinking for organization? And I think it was less than 10% of that same 75% who said, we actually are doing it. We all know about it, but we're not really taking the time and the energy to do so. And in EQ development, we say that it's a lot about thinking about feelings and feelings about thinking. And that reflection process helps you to develop the areas that you need to work on, and an executive coach can help you throughout your journey. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mohammed, executive coaching. Okay, I think I would like to, I have lots of questions for you, but we have questions from the audience, and I would like to take as many as possible today, because the last time we couldn't take several questions. Let me see. Okay, Uchora, I'm going to start with you because Ivie Okpanachi referred this to you. I'll read the question twice. Thanks, Uchora, for the insights on the relationship between the functional skills and emotional skills. My question is, how should organizations approach the issue of emotional intelligence for leaders who are excellent in their functional roles, yet lacking in EI? I'll take it again. Thanks for the insights on the relationship between the functional skills and emotional skills. My question is, how should organizations approach the issue of emotional intelligence for leaders who are excellent in their functional roles, yet lacking in EI? I hand the virtual microphone over to you.
Thank you, Eugene. So first of all is to recognize that leaders and people in organizations are not passive participants in this whole process. It's to recognize that emotional intelligence is a key skill. And therefore, as you plan the migration of people through the 4 bars of the organization, it is important before they move from one bar to another to ask what competencies do they have. See, there are 4 bars, key bars in an organization. There's the technical bar. Then at that point, your job is just to do. You're given something to do and you do it. The next bar is the managerial bar, where your job is to get people to do and just to do a little. Beyond that bar is the leadership bar. And beyond that bar is the strategic leadership bar. In the strategic leadership bar, your job is to understand the to set the strategic direction of the company, and then pass it down to the people at the leadership bar who rewrite it in the different organizational languages and pass it down to the people who will get the people to do. Now, if you don't even understand this, and organizations do this all the time, they fly people up based on functional expertise. So because you are very good at what you do in IT, or you're very good at what you do in legal, or you're very good at what you do in accounting, you move up the ladder very fast. And so you're moving up based on your functional expertise. And so I think that organizations should, for example, have a leadership competency model, something that says, until you have got this and you have got that, you're not moving to the next stage. And by it, you build it into the appraisal system. I'll give you an example. If you have worked in the Nigerian banking system in the last 20 years, you will see what I mean. Sometimes people fly up the banking ladder, based on certain competencies that eventually make the leader the leader not ready to manage people. And so the thing is to have a model. What are the things, key skills, the key competencies a person should have before they move from one organizational bar to the next bar? If they don't have that competency, they shouldn't move forward. Now, emotional intelligence can be given as training. The beautiful thing about emotional intelligence is that you can learn it. It is something that you can develop. You can learn it through training. You can learn it through coaching. Mohammed just talked about coaching. And it isn't that hard to transfer the skills. It's just a thing of being self-motivated, making up your mind that you want to do this thing, that you want to be more emotionally intelligent. Now, here's the deal. You want to be emotionally intelligent, yes. You have a coach or you go on training. You need to be very careful where you pick out to go train or to go coach, because cut and paste, going to some country, bringing in some kind of assessment and just delivering it without thinking of the African context is not helping anybody. So the assessments are great. I agree with Mohammed that the assessments are great, but then the assessments have to be assessments that you can look at and you can say, okay, given that this happens in this environment, this is the way this is going to work in our own environment. So it's also about tweaking the process of coaching, tweaking the training process, so that the person gets the benefits of the session, of the training session or the coaching session that the person has asked for. So basically it's two things. Organizations need to be more accountable, decide. Nobody is going into leadership until they have attained or they have been able to acquire these competencies. And then secondly, if you're looking for people to pass on those competencies, to look for the people who will use the right tools and the right techniques that work for our own particular environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uchora. Thank you. Carl, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I would like to just add, because I think what Uchora said is 100% correct. And it leads me to a thought that sometimes organizations, senior level people in organizations actually have to make the tougher decisions. And sometimes I have got this guy who is a phenomenal accountant and he can do all sorts of gymnastics with the finances, but he does not have the people skills that are required. He does not have that EQ. And Uchora's point is, yes, we can develop it, but I'm not going to give you that job until you've developed it, because otherwise I am harming the culture of my organization. Going back to Kwesi's point, I have values on my wall. Going back to what Basil said, people don't even know what they are. And sometimes we've got to make that tough call to say, you're not ready for this role. All right. And yes, we will develop you, but until you can start displaying the behaviors, you're not ready. And sometimes we've got to make that tough call. Quite often your CEO is saying to me, but Carl, this is my best guy. He gets immense results. And I say, yes, but you've got a totally demotivated team and that you could get even greater results. So we sometimes have to make those tough calls before we put people in those positions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now, Basil, before you take a shot at that, I'd like to extend this point a little bit because there is a question Okay, it's true that, okay, fine, you're not ready to take this role, therefore I need coaching, as was mentioned earlier by Mohammed. So there's a question here asking, how does life coaching compare with teaching / counseling with regards to emotional intelligence / performance? Which of them yields better results in leadership? I'll take the question again. How does life coaching compare with teaching / counseling with regards to emotional intelligence / performance? Which of them yields better results in leadership? Who's taking this?
I can start giving a shot to that. So life coaching, counseling, mentoring, coaching, they're different. They follow different approach, even though they try to lead to the bottom line result of improving the performance. But there is a fundamental difference in the approach that each one of these keywords will use. So for example, teaching focuses more on telling, focuses more on developing your knowledge skills. What you need to know, for example. Coaching is probably on the opposite stream of this. Coaching will work on your, let's say, mind training. How does your mind think and work? But will give you least, if minimum, if not of any, knowledge itself on the topic. It will give you more about how would you think about it, address it, what kind of issues are there on the table, and how can you deal with each one of them. So it's more working with the decision-making process from where you are today to where you want to be, and how to make the decision specifically if you're under stress to make that decision. So it's a different level of knowledge, knowing on teaching, and in coaching it's more about the level that Basil was referring to, the being or the being together part.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Welcome.
Yes, anybody wants to add something to this or move right ahead? Okay, Basil, please.
Yes, Eugene, I'm in full agreement with our two colleagues that just spoke before me. I'm just wondering if much of the problem is not a system problem. Because if I look at any job that is being advertised, they always ask you to send in your CV. So we make CV linked appointments. And the person who gets the best qualifications or studied at the best universities, they sort of go to the top of the pack. So we got 100 CVs, but my CV is about number 35 right now because I didn't study at the right places or I didn't have the right qualifications. But I am the emotionally intelligent one. And so one of the things that I know also happens in interviews is that we ask all questions that are, as Yuchora said, it's all functionally related questions. And we don't want to go to questions that deal with ethics. We don't want to easily go to questions that deal with emotional intelligence. We steer clear of it. At one time, I had to appoint a secretary, and I had major difficulties with some of the unions because they said to me, you cannot ask that question. And the question I simply asked was, would you lie to me? And they said, what has that got to do with her being able to type? I said, I just need to hear her response. It just happened to be all ladies that applied. But we very, very many times, we don't even ask people, do you know the values of our company? We're quick to ask them, have you checked our website? Do you know what our business turnover is like? But nobody actually asks, tell me, do you actually know what we stand for? What are our values? And so I think one needs to maybe look at the entire system to see how we can correct this.
Fantastic. Thank you, Basil. I would like to ask something of the audience participants. Thank you very much. Please do me a favor. Go to the Q&A button and help me add a thumbs up to the questions you would like me to ask. There are several questions there. Help me to make a decision, okay? So thumbs up, the question you like, thumbs up. I'll ask the questions with the highest number of thumbs up. While you are doing that for me, oh, Uchora, yes, wanted to ask something.
The person who asked the question just complained that they didn't get everything. I just want to explain the difference between training, coaching, and counseling. Training is what it is. You go in and somebody gives you information that is useful, and then you take it away. It can happen in a virtual environment, or it can happen in a physical environment. Now, counseling is for people who have some kind of issues they need to take care of. When you go for coaching, the assumption is that you're relatively stable. Counseling means that you need some kind of help, you need some kind of therapy, and typically coaching takes care of issues of the future. Counseling is about things that have happened in the past and probably happening in the present. So if, for example, you came to me for coaching, and in the process of having a conversation, you say to me, I can't sleep well at night. I find myself taking 3 tablets of some kind of sleeping pill so I can get some sleep. That would be an alarm for me that perhaps I am not the person you should be seeing. Perhaps you should see a doctor. And basically, when you're a good coach, you have all these partnerships. You have a GP you're working with, you have a psychiatrist you're working with, you have a clinical psychologist you're working with. And so if you are not certified to treat, you can't give certain kinds of therapy. Now, sometimes people double as coaches and counselors. And so if you walk into their consulting room, if they feel that there's a need for them to step backwards and take care of what has happened in the past before they move to the future, then first of all, they start with counseling, and then they bring you up to a stable state, and then you go into coaching. But the point is, people who come in for coaching come in at a relatively stable state. Now, also counseling is more, is deeper, it's more personal, and therefore it can take a whole lot of time. Coaching is a little bit more specific. So you want to acquire certain competencies. We decide that it shouldn't take more than 9 months. And so we get on it and we try to finish in 9 months or in 6 months. But counseling can go on for about 2 years, for 3 years, and sometimes for 15 years, depending on the problem that we are trying to solve. If you came to me and you said, you know, I'd like to do well at work, I'd like to do better at my job. However, I find that I consume a lot of alcohol, or I tend to watch too much TV. That would be an alarm for me. These are not problems that coaches deal with. Counselors deal with those kinds of issues. I hope I've answered the question for.
I can also add to that to simplify the reply. If you are an entry-level leader, then teaching would get the highest results. If you're a middle management level, then training and mentoring will yield better results on leadership. If you're a top level executive, then executive coaching is the best tool for result in leadership, to simplify the answer. And just one clarification, we're referring here to executive coach, not life coach. They're 2 different things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uchora and Mohammed. When Basu was speaking,
sorry, Eugene. The person was still asking the difference between training and coaching.
Yeah, Uchora, let's come back to that if you don't mind.
So if somebody else can take that, it will help.
Yeah. Okay. Let's come back to that. I wanted to ask a question because there's a question here that I wanted to tie to something that Basti said earlier. when Basi was speaking, and it becomes obvious why organizations are sometimes encouraged to do structured interviews. Okay, we're talking about the importance of emotional intelligence. There's a question here asking, okay, if interviews are structured, how best do we test? This is a question from Ray Ateli. How best do we test for emotional intelligence or absence thereof at job interview panels? Because Basi, you were talking earlier about CV-linked appointments. Okay, so it seems a problem. How best do we test for emotional intelligence or absence thereof at job interview panels? Anyone wants to take this?
I can start addressing that question. Okay, job interviews is a common practice. If you look at more of an entry level, a lot of the interviews will focus on what we call an IQ, how knowledgeable you are in certain topics related to the job post that you're being hired for. The higher level you go up, we do more involvement on emotional intelligence assessment. Now, how that can be done practically in real life, there's different scenarios. One of them is what we call an assessment center. And an assessment center could be something outside the organization where you can go to, and there's whole activities and exercises that can give you the results you need to know which is the best person to pick. And it's worthwhile the higher up you go in the organization. That assessment center can also be developed inside the organizations. If it's a large organization, they have an ongoing hiring process. A lot of big companies will do that. And in a lot of cases, what you do is that we also train or certify somebody in HR to go through that assessment center or exercise for hiring people.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead on that question. Yeah.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think that should be enough for that question because we have many questions here. Uchora was reminding us that someone wanted further clarification, the difference between coaching and teaching. The difference between coaching and teaching. Mohammed, you want to go?
So the difference between coaching and teaching?
And teaching, yes.
Okay, so teaching is passing the knowledge in its basic common sense. Coaching, we follow a certain process, but we don't pass. Let me give an example. So if I'm coaching you on a challenge that you have, and then I actually have an opinion on how best you can solve or address that problem. If I'm doing a coaching, I would refrain from sharing that with you until you, in your own thinking process, reach a decision of the way forward. And then I can offer you and say, you know what, I have another perspective. Would you like to hear it and take it into consideration? Okay, but I wouldn't introduce that in the process because I don't want to influence your thinking by my opinion or limit your growth thinking by my experience level. And that's teaching is closer to what we call mentoring, and it's more on a functional level or a knowledge level. So I'll give you a small analogy. I'll try to make it quick. There was this Olympic competition years ago in one of the North countries in Europe. And it was about tennis. And what happened is there was a huge rush of tennis players on the academies for teaching tennis, trying to get classes in order to compete in that Olympic and win. So the training school ran out of tennis coach, and they start to hire skiing coach. So they go to another school teaching skiing and say, okay, we borrow some of you coach. We have a rush of tennis players need to learn tennis and we'll take them to teach. And they would say, we have no idea how to play tennis. I mean, we're skiers. If you give us a racket, we'll go, sideways. We're not gonna swing the racket. And they said, that's a trick. You're gonna coach these players. They already know how to play. They just need to get better, but don't hold the racket. The surprising result is when they look at the result of the competition, 70% of the top scores were those players that were coached by the skiing coach, not by the tennis coach. And if you look at the methodology, a skiing coach had no clue how to help you technically, but he can help you emotionally and mind train you in order to hit a better serve. and get the best out of you, not limit your growth to what you know as a trainer. Where the tennis coaches will give you a technical skill of how to hit the serve better. Okay, so that's a key difference. That the coaching, the tennis coach are more about teaching, which is helpful of an entry level. The skiing coaches were using coaching techniques which help more advanced players.
All right, thank you, Mohammed. I'm going to move to the next question. This is from Ngozi Okpara. From what I am getting so far, emotional intelligence is important for leaders and by implication, followers in organizations. Is there a possibility that EI may be used as a weapon to manipulate, coerce, or control either management or staff? What are the likely consequences of these issues? How can organizations avoid these? Is there a possibility that EI may be used as a weapon to manipulate, coerce, or control either management or staff? What are the likely consequences of these issues? How can organizations avoid these? Who would like to go?
I'll try to give it a go. I'm thinking that, well, yes, if one is emotionally intelligent, we indicated that, well, the person needs to be self-aware and socially aware. So, well, within organizations, individuals who tend to play organizational politics, well, they tend to be aware of the other people and they tend to know what actually takes for the other person, and they are able to manipulate them through, how do you call it, this understanding of the other person and knowing what takes for the other person. But let us understand that, well, if you look at all the dimensions of emotional intelligence as discussed, you reckon that, well, at the end of the day, it is not necessarily, for instance, when it comes to self-motivation, it is much more to do with the intrinsic gratification that individuals get. So the individual is motivated and looks at how the organization achieves its ultimate goals. And that is why when you listen to what Basil mentions, well, it is important that, well, within organizations, we have to emphasize on the vision of the organization, on the mission of the organization, and the values, the shared values, the superordinate goals of the organization. In so doing, once we have people who are emotionally intelligent in the organization, rather than manipulating others, they are rather willing to work as a team. They are rather understanding in their communication. They are rather supportive of each other. So, well, yes, one can say that, well, yeah, in an environment where one becomes emotionally intelligent and the others are not, well, that person could use that to manipulate. But where in that environment, the collective is said that, well, we all operating on that same wavelength. Look at the empathy bit on emotional intelligence. How would I want to manipulate you to my benefit and feel that you get hurt? That is not the case. I would want to work with you in a manner that makes you happy so that I also become happy at the end of the day. Seeking your interest, we being in it together, and we collaborating to work to achieve the superordinate goals of the organization. So if you ask that, how can this be worked out? It is imperative that in such organization, emphasis is placed on the vision of the organization. It is placed on where we are going, why are we here, and the values that will set us there. So in the creation of that culture, once that environment is created, you reckon that individuals find it very difficult to use EI as a manipulative tool over the other people. But then at the end of the day, it is all focused on achieving the superordinate goals within the organization. So that will be my response.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kwesi. Now, I have two questions here. I will direct one to Uchora and one to Mohammed, but I would not like you to answer now. You will answer later on. Mohammed, I think this one is for you because we are so excited about all these, but someone is asking, where is that question since it wasn't upvoted? Okay, someone is asking, is there a hack? You know, we like shortcuts are good. Is there a hack for consistently deepening high performance EI? Is there a hack for consistently deepening high performance EI? All right, I'll give you a chance to answer it later. Don't let me forget. Uchora, And this gives you a chance to do some advertising, but very quickly, because there's a question here. There are actually two questions here. One says, the first one is from Angela Philippa. Hello, facilitators and participants. If Angela is in Egypt, then the resource will be there with Mohammed. Hello, facilitators and participants. My name is Angela Philippa. In Nigeria, there are centers in Nigeria where one can learn emotional intelligence as a professional course. So one can become a professional emotional intelligence personnel, just like we have with psychologists, relationship counselors, etc. And the other related question is, what executive coaching services do you know of or recommend? Does LBS faculty have a structured executive coaching service? Which, all right, if there is time, you take those. Now, Basil, there is a question here, if I would like it to give a shot to, because someone, Oyefunso Orenuga, would like to know, are leaders born, or can leadership be learned, especially as regards character and attitude? Are leaders born, or can leadership be learned, especially regarding character and attitude?
Thank you, Eugene. That particular question we normally call a question for the Leadership 101 course. So that's almost in the very first time somebody comes to a leadership course that we discuss that with them. And there's always a lot of disagreement on this, but I think it's not that difficult to understand. Every single one of us are born with certain skills and competencies, or potential for those skills and competencies that can later be realized. When it comes to leadership, though, I would like to say you can really take any person, put them in the right environment. Now, this is important. They need to be in the right environment, and then they need exposure to all these positive character traits, all these positive qualities that we've been speaking about. And I can tell you, you can develop an amazing leader. So there's the exposure, but then there's a second part I'd like to add, and that is giving people the experience. I'm always amazed at how people sit in an organization, say, let's say they sit just below management. They go for an interview, and then the next day they've been appointed. So now they're a manager. And all of a sudden, there's all this expectation now. Listen, you're a manager now. But now, hang on. When did this person acquire all these amazing abilities if yesterday they were not? So it's what do I expose people to? I think a lot, if I think of a practical example, how many people have identified somebody in their organization to be a possible next leader for that department? But because they're not there yet, why not, while they're not there yet, take them to certain meetings, tell them, don't say a single word. I just want you to sit here, listen, get exposure to how I run meetings, so that when the day comes, that person knows. But I'm always amazed that people can actually be expected to be ready for it when they've never been prepared for it. So the simple answer is, it's not about where you're born and who you're born. I think it has a lot more to do with the development of the development process. But for the development process, it's very important to recognize who are you working with. So if you are with one of those autocratic type leaders, you'll most probably end up becoming an autocratic one, because that's the only model you've ever seen. So for me, that's how I would say. But development, I will take anybody.
Thank you, Basil. I'm going to ask one question. I'll leave it hanging. Anybody can pick it up, but before you answer it, I'll give you time to think about it. I'll ask the question, leave it hanging there, and then I'll now come to Mohammed for the answer to the other question about the hack.
Okay.
There's a question from, well, there's a question from Immaculata Ude Eme. Thanks to our panelists for these beautiful insights into EI. I'd like to know how EI can be used for task shifting in an organization. I'd like to know how AI can be used for task shifting in an organization. I'll come back to this question. So the earlier one I asked, and for which I think Mohammed is prepared, the hack.
Yeah.
Okay. The hack for consistently deep high performance AI.
I wish it's an easy answer. For the last 20 years, I'm looking for shortcuts. But let me put it this way to make it easy and effective. So one of the examples of the models of emotional intelligence I work with classify them in 5 categories, and each category has 3 subscales elements of EQI. So that's a total of 15 subscales. And yes, each one of them will have specific hacks that you can use to get there faster or shorter or more effectively, and they all have to be customized. They can't be more of the general one. So I have to know where am I and where's the skill ability level from where I am. And I'll come back to that in a second. But to give you the areas of where the hacks will fall into, they will fall into mind training. Okay, so there's hacks of how you think and process, managing your energy. And there's hacks on managing your energy, because motivation and self-resilience is a part of that. Making social connections, that's an area that we look for hacks in, and creating your own challenge, because you always have to be growing and developing. And we look for hacks on that. Now, if I go back to the subscales and just give you a specific example from my own experience, I worked with a colleague. Well, he now kind of moved into Australia for the last, let's say, 10 years or so. But he was one of the guys I worked with, had one of the highest objective judgment scores. His objective judgment score actually was higher than my own. And that's one of the elements we measure when we look at reality testing under decision making. So when I was dealing with this person, I will know that most of the time I don't have to double check his facts, assumptions, all the elements into the decision. The only thing I will use with him is, how does he feel about it? Will other people be affected by it? So I'll just quickly check the reality of the feelings. But there's another person in the same team with very subjective judgment. So I know that person will always consider all the feelings into the decision, but I'll have to look into the facts and see if he makes some assumptions on it or not. So the hacks are not generally specifically to me only, but they have to be specifically to the person and the situation I'm dealing with as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. I would like to go on because we have 8 minutes left, and I would like to stop right on time. Uchora, you want to respond quickly to those questions before we have someone take the one about task shifting? Take a minute or two, no more.
Yes, I mean, if you are thinking of acquiring knowledge in emotional intelligence and coaching, please, the best person to speak to is the executive education arm of Lagos Business School. And we will be very happy to have a conversation about your needs, around your needs. You will find some value coming to Lagos Business School for that. But I would like to touch on something about the dark side of emotional intelligence that somebody had just talked about. People always ask this question about emotional intelligence, the dark side of emotional intelligence and the manipulation and all that. But here's the deal. Every organizational practice has a dark side. Teamwork has a dark side. Mentoring has a dark side. Socialization has a dark side. Everything about it's not so much what the practice, it is who you put it in their hands. So if emotional intelligence is in the hands of the wrong person, yes, they will use it negatively. And the question would be, why would anybody take such a sensitive tool and put it in the hands of anybody who is not ready for it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chara. Thank you very much. Anybody ready with the question on task shifting? Anybody wants to take it?
The question again?
Go. Let's understand that, well, emotional intelligence indeed gets the individual to identify self very well through the self-awareness. So you're able to identify your true self. So that, well, within the organization itself, in terms of even the teamwork, well, you are able to, well, once you understand your competency area, you are able to determine, this is an area that I do well in. And for that matter, well, if it is an area for another person, I am able to tell and say that, well, yes, this is not my area of competence, because what, the issue of trustworthiness, as indicated by Basil, also play in here. So, well, for instance, well, we all in consultancy. So I can imagine that if a business is coming to me and I reckon that that is not my area of competency, but that is in the area of Mohammed, I would say that, well, yes, I can refer you to a very good person out there who can help you to do that particular bit. The whole idea is about self-motivation. It is about self, because I'm looking for intrinsic satisfaction at the end of the day. I'm not just doing it because of the money that comes, the satisfaction or the reward that comes with it extrinsically. I'm looking at it in terms of how I feel at the end of the day. So I need to be able to also pass it on to another person I feel who is very competent to do it. So yes, emotional intelligence can play a role in we having to pass tasks around to other people to do it. And that is how I answer that question.
Thank you very much, Kwesi. I am very sorry. There's so many interesting questions here. I will ask some of them, even if you don't have enough time to respond to them. It's because it's also important to know what people are thinking about. Now, where is this? There is this question about, okay, now look at this. From David Ekwaba, how do we differentiate lack of emotional intelligence from subtle mental health challenges? How do we differentiate lack of emotional intelligence from subtle mental health challenges? I'll leave it hanging. We will not answer it, but if I have someone here who says I can respond to this in 30 seconds, I will come back to you.
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
So I'll come
intelligence assessment.
I'll come to you. Now, another question. Imagine that you are in an organization where EI is not reflected in the management structure, or the organization rather is eye service kind of structure. How does EI or EQ play a major role in terms of influencing the management policies of the organization? So where the structure does not reflect EI, or the organization operates based on eye service, how does EI or EQ play a major role in influencing the management policies? Okay, so we'll leave that. That's not even clear to me. So if it's clear to someone else, you can take 30 seconds. Fantastic. Now, there was one that was not a question. It was a comment. Okay, now. I wanted to mention this because we're talking to very intelligent people and they don't have to agree with everything you're saying, okay? And when there is a comment that seems to be, so it's a challenge to us because I think there should be a balance, says Nneka Okpala. I think there should be a balance between EI and technical competence. It's not proper to say EI should take priority. Anybody? All right.
Yes, I'll give it a shot.
Okay, so I'll come to you, Kwesi. I'll come to you, Kwesi. I'm going to give you 30 seconds only for that. So before that, Mohammed, you want to take the earlier one?
Yeah. The first question basically is the assessments for emotional intelligence.
Sorry to interrupt you. Let me just repeat the question for the benefit of the participant. How do we differentiate a lack of emotional intelligence from subtle mental health challenges?
Yes, the answer is what we discussed on the first part, which is the assessment we conduct on emotional intelligence. There is a report that comes out that's more than 20, 30 pages, 3 versions, and you will get to know the differences.
Fantastic. Thank you. Kwesi, 30 seconds.
Well, quickly, we are not ruling out functional competency. All we are saying is that, well, being highly emotionally competent makes you function very well. So that is it. Well, once you are emotionally competent, it indeed enhances your functional competencies. And that is what we need to emphasize. So we are not saying that, well, being functionally competent is wrong, or being emotionally competent is better than being, how do you call it, functionally competent. All we are saying is that what you need emotional competence to enhance your functional competency. And that's the point we are making.
Thank you very much, Kwesi. Thank you, everybody. That's all we can take today. Like I said the first time, good things, the bad thing is that good things come to an end. And we're coming to the end of this second webinar in this 3-part series. I have shared a link to everybody. There's a recording, a video recording from the first webinar. So if you look at, you will see it in the chat box, I think. The next webinar comes up on the 1st of June, part 3. The title of this webinar will be COVID-19, Leadership, Institutions, and Education in Africa. Can EI lead the way? The time again is 12:30 p.m. GMT +1, 12:30 p.m. Lagos time, GMT +1. Thanks to the panelists. Thank you, Uchora. Thank you, Kwesi. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Basil. Thank you, Mohammed. Thanks to the audience. Okay, so that was a good one. So have a good day and stay safe. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.